Yeah, thank you very much, Tina, for the introduction and laying the foundations for, I think, the many discussions later on. I will talk today briefly about what we've been doing at TU Vienna in the last year with a group of students, or actually two groups of students, where we try to, in a way, understand the role of thinking and designing different tourism practices in the context of facing current sets of crises. And before properly explaining what we did, I want to maybe paint the picture of what stimulated, what provoked us to even think into these directions. And it was primarily this quote by Don DeLillo from the book The Names, who says that to be a tourist is to escape accountability. Errors and failings don't cling to you the way they do back home. You're able to drift across continents and languages, suspending the operation of sound thought. Tourism is the march of stupidity. You're expected to be stupid. The entire mechanism of the host country is geared to travelers acting stupidly. You walked around days squinting into fold-out maps. You don't know how to talk to people, how to get anywhere, what the money means, what time it is, what to eat, or how to eat it. Being stupid is the pattern, the level, and the norm. You can exist on this level for weeks and months without rampant or dire consequence. Together with thousands, you're granted immunities and broad freedoms. You're an army of fools wearing bright polyesters, riding camels, taking pictures of each other, haggard, dysentric, thirsty. There is nothing to think about but the next shapeless event. So I'm sure many of us have some sort of level of relatability towards the words from Don DeLillo. And particularly looking at images like these, which are reoccurring globally around the world, not now anymore, but have been the main, let's say, image of tourism up until a few months ago. That's been the kind of starting point for us to rethink how we rethink our overall tendencies towards how we understand the world, how we consume it, how we perform within it, how we reappropriate it, both from the local point of view as well as from the point of view of us entering different contexts, and also to what extent do we impose ourselves into different contexts, and therefore what impacts do we leave. It's very clear also from these words from Guy Debord, which is quoted in his book Privileged Mobilities, who says that tourism is the mode of appropriation of the natural and human environment by capitalism, which, true to its logical development toward absolute domination, can, and now must, refashion the totality of space into its own decor. In a touristified world, we all become tourists and are fostered to see, experience, and act accordingly, whether we want it or not. So setting the tone for a collective sense of responsibility is mandatory. So understanding this level of responsibility in the context of a planet in crisis, we need to truly be aware of what types of crises there are. So we all know about the climate crisis, then the context of mass extraction of resources and pollution, context of mass farming and cultivation, context of mass displacement, migration, or climate migration, which will inevitably be the case in the future, context of mass destruction of natural resources. Then there's also the context of a human trait, which is that of mass oblivion, and the actual continuity of that mass oblivion, where we perpetuate our own ways of going about the world with, in fact, generally speaking, of course, disregard to the things that are happening around us. So it's also the context of the new timeline for humanity in the environment. So talking about the United Nations report, which was issued 2 years ago, on the fact that we may have only 11 years left to prevent irreversible damage. So how do we react to that? For sure, there's been core examples already where these issues have been addressed in different ways. So on an individual level, then there's from going from individual to affecting a much wider global collective response, to response within different disciplines, such as in artistic production or other means of cultural production, to a response through production of new values within different types of disciplines. So either through exhibitions and different ways of, we're trying to find new ways of how to communicate these issues and how we can relate to that, to larger scale declarations between entities within a different discipline. It is also very clear right now within the current situation that these things can be addressed. And I think that's primarily also the goal of this conference today, is to see that how our collective agency or our collective action fueled by necessity can really trigger change if we truly want to. And not to forget the fact that we coexist within other types of beings, and to understand the different levels of interdependency that primarily already exist, but we are perhaps less aware of. So, in other words, it is we are at a state of reconceptualizing everyday life. To put it into words from Bruno Latour, from his book Down to Earth, it is urgent to shift sideways and to define politics as what leads towards the earth and not towards the global or the national. Belonging to a territory is the phenomenon most in need of rethinking and careful redescription. Learning new ways to inhabit the earth is our biggest challenge. Bringing us down to earth is the task of politics of today. So that was kind of the foreground or the initiator or the provocation as to why the previous semester or the last year, myself and a group of students have been looking into trying to understand how nanotourism, as was already explained by Tina, can function as a theoretical and operational framework for design and thinking. And the seminar was one of the first ones that we've hosted since 2014, which focused much more on the aspect of thinking and in specifically analytical pattern thinking, so trying to understand different patterns that occur through research, less than through designing different proposals. So more about asking questions or relevant questions as opposed to designing proposals. And in doing so, we took the framework of nanotourism, which constitutes out of 9 characteristics, which are critical, participatory, bottom-up, site-specific, local, social, responsible, inventive, and educative. And took that as a point of departure to try to understand different aspects of these characteristics and what are the values of these characteristics that occur over time. So one of the initial outputs was that we devised a series of diagrams that try to, in a way, simplify but also clarify what these characteristics could mean in relation to nanotourism. And upon understanding these relations among different entities and the role that nanotourism could play, we started to employ a particular systematic approach towards collecting, identifying, and evaluating existing case studies of nanotourism, and then cataloging them into essentially a group of knowledge or examples which we could use to better understand these characteristics. One of the outputs, which is now available as in the form of an online exhibition, which is already up and running today, was this collective pool of knowledge, which contextualizes this research of nanotourism and the different types of case studies within a focused cross-disciplinary discourse that links to the topic of either being local, being participatory, being bottom-up, in this case social, site-specific, and so on. So we've been working really hard on putting that together in the last few weeks. So I have to say, on that level, it was a truly remarkable feat from the entire student group that has been working tirelessly, in particular the last few days, to trying to get this set up. So thanks for that, and also to our co-mentor Amanda Sperger, who's been also really organizing things so that they work smoothly. I encourage everybody to go to the website, which will link you to the symposium page and later on the recordings of all the talks today, as well as all the research that the students have done, which includes in many ways many of the works or concepts that are associated to all of the speakers that we'll be hearing from today. So we're trying to see it not just as an exhibition, but more of a long-term resource center that will change and adapt as we need.